I know you guys are used to me being super positive. I want Gwent and Gwentfinity to work. And what I mean by that is I want it to still be fun. Hello friends, it's Lionheart here. And this video is going to be part of an ongoing series. And it's about the Gwentfinity balance changes because the results are in. We had our first round of votes. If you qualified, one of the things I'd love to know is, did your changes make it in this time around? And I'm going to give you my opinions on some of these changes and whether they're good or bad and why. And I'll try to do this quickly. This video should hopefully be 10 to 15 minutes. I do have a tendency to go on, but we will see. We have a second balance in just 2 weeks. Remember, normally we would have a whole month for these balances, but they want to try and get a couple of them in to ensure the dev team is around to see how these things flow through. Now, one of the big questions that we need to ask ourselves is, we have 60 changes, right? 15 power increases, 15 power decreases, 15 provision increases, and 15 provision decreases, totaling 60 changes. Is that too many every month? I'm on the fence with this right now, because in the future, perhaps there won't be enough votes to hit 60. That's a possibility. But it's not something I foresee anytime soon. Equally, this is the very first one, but I fully expect 5 of each change from each area around that to revert that change back as people don't enjoy the buff and hate seeing it and nerf it back or think the nerf was too excessive, which is the instance in quite a few of these cases in my opinion, and try and rebuff it. So perhaps actually it's only going to be 10 real changes per month, in which case maybe it's all right. I genuinely want to know what you think about this, and it would be really useful to feed back to the devs while we still have them. So if you think that we should stick to 60 changes, let me know and say stick to 60. If you want it lowered and maybe only 10 changes per category to drop to 40, tell me that as well. I will genuinely take this feedback and send it across to CDPR. So please, please, please do let me know. Now, all of this is me recording live, straight off the cuff, as we see this. So, I guess there's nothing further to do, but to go in and have a look at it. Because this screen is in Gwent, the results are in, and this is where you're going to find it every single time that you are in. It will flash up as you launch into the game, have the ability to click on it, and we can see here, probably one of my biggest shocks, Vi getting a buff. I didn't see any content creators that I saw discussing trying to buff this back. I mentioned it early on, saying I thought it might actually not be a bad idea, but I didn't expect this at all. It really strengthens a quite tedious deck, to be completely honest. Will it stick around? Will it now make the Vi archetype playable? We'll find out together. And don't worry, I will move myself when we get to the provision decreases, okay? So, Vi overall, do I like the change? Honestly, it makes the deck potentially a lot more playable. It's a huge buff, so I'm okay with it. Will it stick around? Who knows? Saskia going to 14 provisions. She does also feature a second time, by the way, I believe, because she is 4 provisions, and she's 4 power 14 provisions, right? That's a lot. Does she feature twice? Maybe I'm wrong. I remember her being 313. But clearly I'm wrong because she's not over here. So, her back to 4 power, I'm alright with it. I don't think she's a 14 power card, despite how strong she is. I think she's okay at 13. It is what it is. Power increase to Unseen Elder. I saw a few people trying to champion this. I don't like this at all. I think this is a super binary kind of card that needed an answer to be removable in that 6 power range, because if it's not, it's winning the round for you, right? I think that's a lot when you consider it's only 12 provisions. Now, this card, we all know that Devotion Vampires isn't great, and that non-Devotion Vampires is better, so this list's craziest, well, this card's craziest option is limited to you running a suboptimal line. Vampires typically tend to be rent-free, and they're trying to focus on Operator and lots of Fledders. But does it make the card better? Yes. Was the card underplayed? Yes. So I can see the argument for buffing it. I just personally don't like it. So that takes us down to a vote. I voted for this, and it is Gezras of Leda. I do feel that this card should have been in the 6th region all along, for the same reason that I think Unseen Elder should be. 5 power removal, and in some instances 5 provision removal, shouldn't be able to deal with one of your most crucial engines. Gezras is still super removable, it's vulnerable to locks, it still gets stolen by Enslave and Vigo's Muzzle. So the card is by no means now cracked, but it does now have a chance at sticking on the board, or you have to at least give it some thought. Love this change. It's the first one of my votes that is in. Surprise appearance. We're buffing Assimilate, and one of Assimilate's best cards in Brathens. It's back to 4 power. This surprises me a lot because, quite frankly, the attempt to just destroy certain archetypes, particularly Nilfgaard, I fear is going to be a running theme, and genuinely, if people don't get over that, they could genuinely destroy Gwent, in my opinion, but that's for another video. Expect a lot of Assimilate this time around, is what I will say. I'm very, very surprised. I'll be honest, I'm very surprised to see this. Really was not expecting a buff to Brathens. Assimilate, here we come. I saw people trying to get Phoenix buffed. It's fine. You know, it's Phoenix now starts at 5 base power. The vitality and nothing else obviously changes for the Phoenix Hatchling. It's slightly better carryover at 10. I'm here for it. Second one of the changes that I was happy to champion, it is Crow Mother. Now, the one thing I will say, I did vote this way. I voted for a power increase, and I wish I'd voted for something else. While I am fine with Crow Mother at 5 in the way she works, and that extra bit of carryover will be really nice for Druid fans out there in Skellige, of which I am one, my concern, Crow Mother would actually have been better at 4 power 9 provisions, allowing the list to add in that little bit more flexibility that it currently struggles with. Crow Mother is still just greedy carryover, effectively. I love that, but the list struggles to be competitive because it can't quite fit in much or any control. Now, I like all engine decks, but I think perhaps a better buff would have been, and I'm guilty of this too, 9 provisions instead. Either way, happy to see it. Ruin! Love this. Very happy to see Ruin getting a buff. It is now 4 base power. That carryover consume is now more of a threat. At 9 provisions, this could be quite the scare. Curious, let's see how it goes. I'm also okay with the Flying Redanian. Horde Syndicate getting multiple potential buffs. This obviously can go into quite a few different lists. While I won't jump in, you can see some of the provision buffs make Jackpot more playable, for instance. Maybe Flying Redanian ends up in those lists. We will see. But I am very, very happy to see that. It's a card that used to be around a lot. Doesn't feel like it's been great value more recently. Do I expect this to have some huge meta shift? No, but the other meta syndicate lists have been eradicated by these votes, so maybe we will see more Flying Redanian. Second huge surprise, Artorias Vigo gets a base power increase. I don't know who convinced people to buff Assimilate. That's wild to me. But hey ho, Artorias Vigo gets a power buff as well. I think Nilfgaard's only hope now is Assimilate. Nistral getting a power buff, it wants dominance, it feeds into that. I think this is fine. The card felt a little bit on the power creep side, but realistically, it only ever existed in Keltulis properly because of the nature of the way the card works. It can help you fight for that dominance, but I'm not so sure it fits in modern Wild Hunt. Frost, if I'm being honest. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe you disagree. It'll certainly help it out. Black Railer gets a power buff too. very similar cards, so I guess what else am I going to say? Do I think we're going to see a load of Black Railer? No. I'm a little surprised this card made it in. One that I'm very happy to see here, Papa Vess getting a cheeky little power increase. Very nice to see. We can't tweak the way Vesemir works, and I'd have loved to change the way Vesemir works, but again, story for another video. I am happy to see a power buff for it, because I do like NR Witches, and obviously I know it's neutral, but come on, NR Witches. And I think Vesemir is a really good tool for them. Hopefully we get to see a little bit more of that. I'm fine with it. The last two changes are brilliant changes in my opinion, and maybe my favourite among these, because I'm a little bit underwhelmed by the majority of these power changes, because I don't necessarily think a huge number of them move anything positively. Cleaver's Muscle. This card is a buff to one card that will buff several others, and I think that's really useful. Various crime cards, Cleaver himself, all benefit from this card getting a buff, and it helps buff them without the weirdness of having to buff another Syndicate Gold card into that weird mid-range of lots of good 10, 11, and 12p golds, and none of them really, they're all just mid-range misc. So I like this change. It is another one that I did vote for. And the last one I voted for that I think will have an incredibly impactful change. Revenant is a point more. Every Kwedwani Revenant is now 4 base power. That's huge for me, and I really hope it does mean we start to see a little bit more of cursed sort of spectre-y NR coming to the forefront. Happy to see it. Think it's a good change. Overall, power increases, meh. From what I can see, they're okay, but I think there's something to be desired for a couple of these changes. Things I expect to see reverted. If Vi ends up being good, it will get reverted in my opinion. If Unseen Elder is too good or too frequent, it will get reverted. Although I'm not sure Vampires has enough even now, personally. But we will see. With Verena getting a provision buff as well, maybe, just maybe, it will be the case. Overall, I think it's okay. But I've been happier. Now to the power decreases. Torres goes to 14. His 14 provisions goes down to 3 base power, which... obviously, this is a very, very consistently available card. Torres is so much tempo. I honestly don't think this change makes the blindest bit of difference to this card. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think this change makes any difference whatsoever. I personally don't hate Torres. I'm being completely upfront with you. And if you're trying to nerf that Enslave list, well, we've just done that hugely over here. I say I'll get to it in a minute. With Nilfgaard and its meta list have basically been nerfed out of existence with these changes, and we're just going to get kind of lots of Assimilate, I think. Overall, not surprised, but meh. Svalblood! I don't know if a power change makes any difference to Svalblood either. I feel like it was included because people wanted to nerf it rather than a power change helps, if I'm being honest. Obviously, yes, it's a strong card. Same with Sove. Again, this deck, incredibly persistent for Skellige and was the one that was viewed as the meta deck. That Patricidal Fury, Svalblood, Sove, Svalve. Let's call them Svalve. Team Svalve. That was perceived as quite heavy meta. So I'm not really surprised, if I'm being honest, that both of them have got a hit. The power change is probably a smaller nerf to both of them than a provision change, so I don't think it will outrightly remove them from existing, which means that list, well, hope will potentially still have a chance, but so many parts of that list are also nerfed in here, we'll see how it fares. Angus Breakery down to 6. I can understand why people want to do this on the basis, if I'm arguing that these 12 provision key cards should be at 6, I guess it's hard for me to argue that Angus Breakery shouldn't be. I liked it at 7. That's all I can say. I like that elves are good. I'm well aware that Heist is irritating and problematic. It also gets a nerf, which we'll get to, but yeah, the fact that the biggest issue with this interaction is that Heist removes locks. So having this within at least partially reachable removal range might force a little bit less greed, maybe force Elves players to try and find a way to protect these cards and then trade the loss of that protection. So maybe. I hate this. The Vice list has been nerfed out of existence. It's Acherontia and Ixora have already taken demonstrable nerfs to their Vice abilities, and while that list was still being played high-end meta, it's by no means as easy as people imply that it is, and nerfing these even further when you're taking Open Sesame out, for me it's complete madness, because we've just deleted Vice from existence now. As far as I can see, I understand, and I know I said I wouldn't talk about these, so I'll get to it in a minute, but these two nerfs seem incredibly excessive to me. It is what it is. Calvate, also getting a power nerf, and this one I love. A power nerf far more impactful than a provision nerf here, in my opinion. One of the rare occasions. Calvate's ability is super strong, and it gives you all that consistency. Sure, it has downsides because of bleeding and blah, blah, blah. My biggest issue is for a card that gives you so much consistency in terms of your next steps, it has too much reach. I would be very happy to see Calvate go down, or would have been happy to see Calvate at 6 base power. I don't think there's any need for that going forward because the lists that Calvate typically are played in Enslave 5 and Enslave 6 are now so demonstrably weak by comparison that I don't actually think it's relevant, and I think it would be a waste of time to nerf it again. I'm still sure people will. Just my opinion. Vanadane at 6 power. This I don't particularly like. Again, the Elves list has been nerfed past. It was already competitive, but had some very difficult matchups. I think the two key parts of this, well, the three key parts, the Heist, the Angus, and the Vanadane, they form everything that list is trying to do to make it work. Hitting all three of them just kicks that list down to meme, or at best, I'm trying. And I think that's because nothing around it's been buffed to make it feel better. That just makes me sad. If I'm being honest, I really like Elves. I think they're a great counter to Super Greed and Hyper Control, so I think that Swarm has got a place. It's also very beatable if you understand what you're facing a lot of the time, so there's a reason you don't see it in the qualifiers, for instance, because it is vulnerable to understanding its game plan. And now its game plan is that it's not a card, or not an archetype, potentially. Hopefully I'm wrong on this. This is just my opinion, by the way. And if you disagree with me, tell me. Let me know. I've discussed Ixora. Philippe, status Nilfgaard. Oh, I can't believe I'm saying this, having played Gwent all these years. I actually liked status Nilfgaard. Philippe going down to 5 power. It's such an incredibly strong engine. It being within reach because it's an 8 provision card. I can understand why people have done this. You had to save removal for Philippe. If you knew this, you either had to bleed him out in round 2, face someone who was silly enough to give you him in round 1, or have an instantaneous answer for this card, or it snowballed. So I understand the change. It's fine. Traherne, I can't pretend I didn't vote to nerf Traherne in every possible way. This is one of the examples where I firmly believe this card is the only example of a card that should not exist in Gwent, while Gwent has any form of competitive scene. I hate the card. I'm not surprised. Nausicaa Sergeant. And I know I'm going through this at a rate of knots, but I want to get through this and I want to keep this video condensed. Nausicaa Sergeant, again, I'm not surprised, but it's a 6 provision card now that plays for 9. Obviously, it also has Assimilate triggers, so even with the nerf to this, I do expect to still see it in Assimilate. I understand why this is frustrating, because of how consistently they could get this card. What I will say is, the number and volume of nerfs to Nilfgaard strategies, and not just Nilfgaard, to Elves, I think this is one of the things we're going to learn that balancing as a community is tough. Because what we've done is destroy archetypes with no collective re-bringing up other cards to fill their spots necessarily. We've buffed things we like and nerfed whole archetypes. All of them, you know, all of Nilfgaard is just getting hammered here. So, because we don't like Enslave, we've nerfed every good card in Enslave, but that has a massive knock-on effect to a lot of the other stuff. You know, it's and the same for Patricidal Fury. Both of its key cards have been significantly nerfed, as has the leader ability, as has Kertrold. We're just taking whole archetypes and just trying to delete them from the game in terms of the competitive. And hopefully we then see community ingenuity and things rise up, and we reflect on that and go, oh, we over-nerfed it because nobody's playing it. I really hope that's what we do, because we are... If these are the changes, this is the style of change every month. Every time there's a list that's good, it gets deleted. We are looking at mid-range draw your golds Gwent again, folks. I played that meta. I played that year of Gwent. That's not what I'm looking for, and I don't think any of you are going to enjoy that either in reality. I understand the reflexive nature of some of these nerfs, and I get it. But the more I see, the more I'm convinced that coordination on buffs and nerfs, trying to avoid completely destroying whole archetypes, will be very positive for Gwent. An example of this, Reaver Hunters have been nerfed to unplayable. This card now is broken. We have officially broken a card in Gwent and deleted an entire archetype in the process. That is idiocy. Reavers had the lowest win rate in pro rank of structured archetypes. And yet, idiotically, we have wasted a meaningful potential change on just deleting an archetype. I hate Reavers. I think they're boring to play and boring to face, but they're not good, and they did not need this nerf. I can't believe I'm going to be the person trying to encourage people to vote to buff this back to be at least playable, and by that I mean not broken by design. This just makes me sad. This just makes me sad, and I can't believe I'm saying it. Again, another example of a big nerf for Nilfgaard. A power one is less impactful than a provision one, for sure. In fact, the rest of it's all Nilfgaard, Nilfgaard, Nilfgaard. Why on earth people are nerfing cultists when they've already been decimated is beyond me, because it's also got one of the lowest win rates across Gwent. Armor Cavalry, the locks, I know control is frustrating. I'm not surprised at this reflexively being the case. I honestly don't hate it. It still has one armor. This is fine. Marine for me isn't the problem. It is a very good card. Slave Driver is the problem for me. But nerfing both of these seems a little unreasonable. Again, this card is the problem. I'm very happy. This is a 6 provision card, so I'm okay with that. And I think this should be a 6 provision card. But as a result, these didn't necessarily need the hits because it's already much worse. And I think people really are underestimating how big a difference effectively 2 provisions can be to a deck, when actually more than 2 have been removed and all the power is gone. And so some big changes. For me, these lists have been eradicated. And again, a complete waste. A power decrease on the Deacon here. Feels like a waste. What I do love to see is using potential provision nerfs to buff things. Really happy that we are now in the provision section and I can say, Uprising, buff. It is now 16 provisions. I used to love Northern Realms Uprising. I used to think it was really fun. Those that kind of Northern Realms Witches used it for a little while. I know it's sometimes a shield wall, sometimes this. We saw some sort of swarmy list, which isn't the most common in Northern Realms, necessarily use it as well. I'm happy with it. Jackpot back to 13. There was a time when Jackpot was the terror of the Gwent ladder. I don't think 13 provisions will be enough to push it back there with all the other Syndicate nerfs and no notable Syndicate buffs that I can see to go alongside it past the Flying Redanian. But it'll be nice to see people experiment with it, because Jackpot is at least, it's quite a one-dimensional leader, and it kind of leads you into playing a certain kind of list, which maybe we'll see again. This is stupid. I don't know what else to tell you. The only 15 provision card in the game is not Eternal Eclipse. For me, again, an example of we're just destroying archetypes because we don't like them, not because they're too good. Sad. Waste of a vote. And I don't like it. I know you guys are used to me being super positive. I want Gwent and Gwentfinity to work. And what I mean by that is I want it to still be fun. Fun for me is not destroying everything. That's just me. And I understand. It is what it is. Temple getting a nerf, that doesn't surprise me. It didn't make my list, and in fact, most of these haven't, as it seems. Clearly, I am off the needle of what people want, maybe. Although I suppose we only get 12, and I've so far had maybe 5. Oh, I'm doing okay. Yeah, Temple getting a nerf doesn't surprise me. The Northern Realms list is super strong with this. I do think Mutagenerator is the bigger issue. But both of them getting a nerf at the same time, it's big. But that list in competitive conquest format, I cast the top 64 most recently, and on Red Coin that list had an 81% win rate. What you don't tend to remember is on Blue Coin it had less than 50. So on Ladder, its win rate isn't actually as good as you think, but it is unquestionably a decent deck. So I'm not too surprised to see that. Status Nilfgaard again getting kicked in the face. Jean, Admiral Ron Pally getting a provision increase. He is now 13, and I do think it might be a serious ask for Status Nilfgaard to still have a chance at this point. I've discussed Heist already. Heist is a problematic card in theory. Maybe some kind of rework to it would have been nice. The worst part about this card is its Echo. The fact that it spawns three cargoes. I would have liked it to instead maybe spawn 1 cargo hold with 3 charges that cool down each time so that it was actually answerable. In which case, it could have been a 10 provision card because you could prevent it in the same way that you can prevent things like Mutagenerator before they start finding value on deploy. So, but the fact that cards... Either way. It's too late for that. So, Heist getting a nerf. Okay. Battle Stations. Now, this one actively definitely deserved a nerf, and I'm happy to see it. I understand the nerf. It makes sense. This card was one of the strongest cards in Gwent, in my opinion, for what my opinion is worth. The nerf, alongside all the other Nilfgaard nerfs. Now, again, as I say, there are so many that it feels redundant, but this card was way too good. Double thinning, double play, could be double removal, double engine. It was too much. It makes sense that that's the case. Stefan, again, another Nilfgaard card, getting that provision nerf. Given that Enslave 6 probably doesn't exist anymore, I'm not so sure Stefan will either. Obviously, he found a place in that weird hybrid, sort of assimilate, sort of not deck that has been floating around for a while. I don't know if you can afford it anymore, with this being one more, Enslave being, again, losing a provision, as we'll get to. Vilgefortz going up as well. I firmly expect us to see a switch, if people stick with Enslave, to Enslave 5 instead, and Stefan might just get cut if that's the case, and it might go more mid-range Enslave removal. We might see Yen Invo back, we might see Igni drop into the list, for instance. We'll see. Or maybe even OG Geralt. Controlled! Not surprised on this one. I feel like a better change to this, if we had the ability, would be to lower the armor this gives down to 3, maybe 4 armor instead. I'm not surprised. And this one, because this card is so omnipresent across its faction, I can understand this change. It isn't one I voted for, but I get it. Makes sense to me. Vilgefortz gets nerfed. It is now 10 provisions. Again, that whole Enslave 6 list has been decimated. I think the change to Vilgefortz to make him only summon bronzes from your opponent was already more than significant. Will we still see Vilgefortz? In some lists, I'm sure we will, just because of the nature of what the Tor Punish does with that little bit of... It's got its own body. I'm very curious to see what Nilfgaard lists remain outside of people playing Assimilate, it seems, this season. We'll find out. Again, the Skellige list, the Patricidal Fury, Self-Wound, taking another hit here now. Sigvold is up to 9 provisions. It is a pretty impactful card in its archetype. So the change in a vacuum would be fine, and I kind of get the change in a vacuum. My biggest sadness, as is a running theme, is it's not just the one card. We've destroyed a whole list and not realized all of the collateral damage of destroying that list means that self-wound is now worse and so it's fine. Mutagenerator, this card should have been 7 provisions a long time ago. Great change, love it, here for it. Open Sesame, I know I touched on Vice earlier. I don't like this change. I understand why people want it, because of course at 6 provisions you now can't create Open Sesame from Shady Vendor, but that just means the list's gone. Even if you'd left Acherontia and you'd left Ixora alone, for me, that is not the way you make that less consistent. I get that Shady Vendor was having like a 50, maybe even 60% chance to find this card, and it felt really frustrating. Well, we've already shown that we can buff crimes. Spoiler from what's behind me. Pulling the strings has gone down to 5 provisions. That already diluted the pool and made it harder. We could have done things like that and thought a little bit more outside the box to not destroy the list, but nerf the bigger problem. And I think that would have been better. I'm not saying the card's not great. I'm saying that there's a bigger picture to how we could have done that, and I think this is way too much across everything. Personally, we'll see. Thirsty Dame, again, it's that whole in a vacuum thing. I completely believe this card should be a 6 provision card, simply because there is clearly text missing from its ability. Thirsty Dame should read during your turn and then the rest of it. The fact that it doesn't makes the card really irritating, and as a result, it has to be a 6 provision card. It has to be, because while this is in existence, lists like Symbiosis and stuff like that it really sways their win potential unfairly, in my opinion. It's a shame that that change didn't creep in towards the end, but this one I do understand, even though I am sad that the list it's in took a couple of kicks. Slave Driver completely makes sense. This is a 6 provision card. This card, again, in a vacuum or outside of it, this is a 6 provision card with a 6 provision ability and enables a lot of the other issues, right? So I'm completely fine with this getting a nerf. Not surprised at all. Happy to see it. We're almost there. If you've stuck with me this long and listened to me talk for this long, you have probably visited me before over on twitch.tv/Lionheart, where we are live. But we're also live on YouTube these days. So if you're watching this and you don't use Twitch, I multi-stream now. So whenever I'm live with Gwent, I'm live in both places. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out on that, follow the channel. Follow the channels. Do both. I'm sure I'll have remembered to insert nice graphics like over here to help you remember that. And if I didn't, well, it's in the comment. It's in the description, not the comments. Maybe I'll put it there too. Anyway, now, fancy editing trick. Such a child. Okay. Last but by no means least, it is the provision decreases. These are the buffs. This is what you're gonna be seeing, folks. Provision decreases. Things that just got buffed. Imperial Formation. This is the opposite. Because it's a decrease, we've used our potential to buff to nerf. Not 1, not 2, but 3 different leader abilities, helping to decimate 3 particular lists that we don't like, alongside a bunch of nerfs to their cards. Imperial Formation, Enslave, and Patricidal Fury all losing a provision. Amphibious Assault going back to 13. I did not see that coming. That one surprises me greatly. Hugely surprised by that. And Siege? Okay, I don't know. I saw nobody arguing for either of these things, and I am absolutely stunned that these got enough votes. I'm assuming that's because I obviously exist in the bubble of kind of the English-speaking content creators and communities, and it's really interesting to see, and I'd love if you are aware of which community pushed for this, whether it was the CIS region, whether it was the Chinese region and players from there, or somewhere else that I am completely oblivious to. Or was it just organic and I missed the whole thing? I am stunned by these changes. That's what I'll say. Didn't expect either of them. Siege is not a 13 provision scenario. It's not. It can be super abusive when it's good, and we're going to see a fair bit of Siege on the basis that it just gained 2 provisions for its standard list. Very surprised by that. For me, Haunt is a 13 provision scenario, and probably Passiflora because of how power crept the cards it spawns are. For me, there are no other 13 provision scenarios, as I see it, is what it is. Portal to 11! I voted for this. Portal is not good at 11 provisions, but it was damn sure not good at 12. I believe this card at 10 provisions is decent, because I would love to see it as a cool alternative to battle stations, because it is just a worse version, let's not mess around. But I really like the way this card functions and the way it used to work. It opened up some fun stuff. I will be voting again to buff Portal to 10, and I think it could actually be really fun. This one blindsides me. Novigrad is 11 provisions. For me, this is one of the best cards in the game. I did not expect a buff to Novigrad. Especially given how hard people have tried to nerf the Vice list into the ground. I'm really surprised to see the card that potentially is the one that can go anywhere now getting a buff. I think this will very much form a place in new jackpot decks, and it at least gives us a chance to see Syndicate in the coming months. Philavandrel gets a provision decrease. I like this. I know there were some people trying to champion a power buff for him instead. I think the provision one is far more impactful for a card like Philavandrel. I've never really found him worth it in the nicest possible way. So I'm happy to see this. I think that's pretty decent. I'm not sure he's still worth it yet. I think at 10 provisions, he's a great card, or at 5 power, 11 provisions. So maybe he'll sneak in for a buff in future, but we'll see. Again, a card I'm still surprised this made it in. Not because it doesn't need a buff, to clarify. Philippa clearly needs a buff. The card is power crept crazily. I'm just surprised enough people felt that it fit. So I'm happy with this. You know, it's an 11 for 11. The removal can be really valuable. Do I think we're going to see this card ever when it's not created by Temple of Melitele? No. But I'm not sure what it would take. Maybe at 10 provisions you would. Maybe you are running it now because it's 1 base power as Revenants start to find their way. Maybe. The most contentious of all, and of one that I expect to flip and flop and yo-yo every single vote, Magic Compass is 9 provisions again, opening up alongside Roach also being buffed back into Golden Necker range, opening up Skellige to have that Magic Compass Skellige list back again. I'm not surprised by this. I voted for this and I've championed this. Magic Compass was designed to be a Golden Necker card. It stopped existing outside of Shoop Troll Porter. It just doesn't exist. It has to be a 9 provision card. Do I think this card could have been balanced better? Yes. I've said it 1,000 times. The second form of this, which is the one that everyone has a problem with, does feel Swiss Army knife. There was a very easy way to change that I argued for. If you played it, attach it to Adrenaline. Its second form. If it's Adrenaline 0, Adrenaline 1, if it's your last card, it can only create legendaries at 9 provisions or lower. For every extra card in your hand, allow it to have an extra provision of create. Easy to understand, easy to explain, and it stops that Swiss Army knife feel while it maintains what it was trying to do. It's not an option now. I am very happy to see this back. But the existence of this and this leads me to my biggest surprise. I firmly expected Golden Necker to be provision increased, and I really thought most people would vote to push it up to 10 just because they could. And what makes me a little sad is the fact that the only reason that didn't happen is because it wouldn't have broken it, because they fixed that. If Golden Nekker could have been broken by taking it to 10, I guarantee it would have been in this. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm being cynical. Either way, I firmly expect Magic Compass and Golden Nekker to go to 10 next month. I can't wait, or rather, I suppose in 2 weeks. I'm going to look back on this, and we're going to look at my predictions and see how well I did. But overall, I love this. I think the Pirates deck obviously will come back with a flurry now, and it will possibly feel great again because of how many other lists don't while people work it out. But we'll see. Verena goes to 9. This card was underwhelming when it dropped. Love this at 9 provisions. Not gonna lie. So, I'm happy with this change. Love to see vampires getting some love. Big vampire fan. I'm here for it. This one's interesting. The card gives me an aneurysm just reading it, but I actually like this change. It's a complex card to play, requires some thought. Calculation for the average player can be a problem. I'm a little surprised it got the buff, but I'm happy to see it. Oh, if it isn't the best bronze in the game, and if you don't know, well, clearly I am older in Gwent years than I think. This absolutely should be a 5 nowadays, and I'm here for it. And Reaver Scout gets a buff. That surprises me, given that Reavers have been deleted, and that this is actually pretty great across multiple. This as a 6 makes far more sense than this being unplayable, in my opinion. But those are our changes. You've seen them all. What do you think of them, and how do you feel it's going to shape up? They're in game right now. Did your changes make it in? That's a huge question. And if they did, how many of them? I've asked you a few questions over the course of this video, and I'd love as much feedback as possible. Do you agree with me? Have archetypes been over-nerfed? And do you plan on helping fix that in the coming month? Do you think it's good that a card has literally been broken by this system by choice? And again, do you think that's healthy? Are there too many changes? Bear in mind, of course, that I expect at least 5 out of 15 from each section to be reverted. Are there too many changes at 60, or would you prefer each section only to get 10 changes a month, taking it to 40? I know that information. I actively want so that I can send it on to CD Projekt, so please let me know in the comments down below. And overall, are you excited for what is to come? It's going to be interesting. I'm going to be jumping into stream live on both Twitch and YouTube shortly after this goes live to see what we can experience, work out what, if anything, from the meta is still good, and what of these changes are going to be better. My predictions. Siege. Yeah, there's going to be plenty of Siege. That took a notable buff. Assimilate and Vi are the lists people are going to try out. Maybe some Cursed because of the Kedwani Revenant buff. Nilfgaard has been yeeted out of existence aside from Assimilate. Elves as well are really going to struggle. Patricidal Fury will absolutely disappear, as will Syndicate Vice, the current deck. We will see. More Golden Nekker lists on the rise, potentially with that Roach buff, giving them that extra bit of thinning that they were missing. And of course, it's going to be Pirate Season for Skellige, now that Magic Compass is back on the agenda. This was our first one. I hope we all learned something. It's unlike me potentially to seem negative, but it is what it is. And the one thing I didn't actually point out, and I've just realized, there was a secret, there's an extra. There are 61 changes. Oh my. There are 61 changes because 2 of them drew. The Bare Knuckle Brawler snuck in because 2 changes had the exact same amount, and it is now 5 provisions. I didn't see this. That is so much worse for the Vice deck again. I don't like it. It's a small thing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you this, but my understanding is there were a couple of cards that were 1 vote away from making it in. 1 vote would have made the difference. And all I'll say is it would have fit into the cursed archetype of Northern Realms very, very well. So a single vote can really make all the difference. That's all I'm saying, folks. That's all I'm saying. I wonder who that could have been. Thank you so much for watching the video. I look forward to seeing the feedback and reactions. And of course, as always, I'll be talking about this all through the next few weeks. I'll share my new votes just before I post them and sort of confirm them. We'll make a video for it, but I'll definitely be doing it live up on the channel as well. So I hope to see you there. Thank you for joining, my friends. Love you all, and I will see you next time.